49ers faithful, got to say, what off season? Because we got news headlines dropping daily, and the Niners probably made the biggest trade I remember them ever making in our lifetime. Jose, what do you have to say about this one? The Miami Dolphins, we sent 3 first-round picks their way to get the number 3 overall pick. It's huge. It's a groundbreaking trade.
No, yeah, it is huge. It's been the talk of the NFL for the past 24 hours since that trade was made. And it's actually been the biggest trade so far and the biggest offseason move so far of this new calendar football year in 2021. So it's huge. And we'll go into detail what that really means or what we think really means for the 49ers. But I think this is huge. I think the fact that we've mentioned it before, that John Lynch is an aggressive guy, an aggressive GM, and he's proving it again. They want their guy. Who that guy's going to be, we'll talk about that later. But I think just initial thoughts on the trade was that the front office is being aggressive. And guess what? I kind of like it.
Well, I like how John isn't afraid to move draft capital around to make these moves happen. And I think when you're in a division with the Rams, who are constantly making these type of trades happen, I think that there was a lot of pressure on the Niners going into this season. And obviously, we've mentioned it on the show before. We're Jimmy guys. We believe in Jimmy Garoppolo, the quarterback. But after a certain point, it started to feel like that Jim Harbaugh type news cycle where just the writing was on the walls and there was going to be a breakup happening. And clearly, the Niners didn't trade up to 3 to draft Penei Sewell. We know what's happening with that number 3 overall pick. We don't have a name attached to it. That's probably the biggest thing that we're going to be touching on in this video in particular here. But out the gate, I mean, obviously, it's hard to avoid all the draft hype and looking at these prospects, even if you do believe that Jimmy Garoppolo is the guy going into 2021. So who's caught your eye the most, especially at that number 3 pick?
I think you put it perfectly is we didn't go ahead and send 3 first round picks just to get anybody. I think there's 2 main guys here that I think everybody already knows. It's either going to be BYU quarterback Zach Wilson or Ohio State quarterback Justin Fields. Both have been able to prove in their college careers that they're great passers. They're very mobile, both of them. To me, just because I've probably seen more Ohio State games and could see Justin Fields a little bit more, I'm still not too sold on Justin Fields, if I'm being completely honest with you. A little bit undersized for my liking. And I'm not saying you have to be a certain height or you have to be a certain size to play quarterback. Obviously, guys like Drew Brees and Kyler Murray have kind of defunct that. Russell Wilson.
Yeah, he's a little thicker than Zach, I would say, though.
You would think so. For me, he just seems a little bit more fragile. I don't know why. At Georgia, coming out of Georgia, I don't know if you remember the Quarterback One series from Netflix. He was actually highlighted in that Netflix series. And ever since then, I saw that his senior year in Georgia playing high school football. And to me, he's always seemed like a nimble guy. I'm not too sure if I'm just looking too much into it. But to me, I think Zach Wilson is a much better draft prospect. And I don't know if a lot of you guys saw the social media post of him just slinging it pretty much across his body, almost like 50 yards. That looks pretty exciting to me. Exactly. I would not mind seeing that type of throw on a guy wearing a Niners uniform. So for me, Zach Wilson for now, but it could very change within the next week.
I agree with you. I'm leaning with Zach Wilson, not just off that pro day, but I've just been treating myself and checking out some of his highlights and the way the guy can move side to side and add so much touch, yet zip on that ball is something that I think has really elevated him among the draft boards. Now, he's a little tougher to evaluate based off the competition level, but if you just look at just the way those throws are coming out of his hand, I think that stuff will translate to the pro level. I know one of the big talking points with Justin Fields has been in some of their tougher games last year is where you started to know those cracks in his game. And of course, there's always that stigma on Ohio State quarterbacks, especially coming off the Dwayne Haskins fiasco in Washington. Now, I think that Justin Fields is far more mature than Dwayne Haskins, and clearly that has shown over time. But I can see the potential, like you said, for him to get exposed at the next level because we have already seen tremors of that in his college game. Obviously, Mel Kiper's been the one leading the charge the most on Justin Fields to the 49ers, and I could see why you would love him. Again, he's mobile himself. He doesn't have quite that same Zach Wilson touch, but I've seen him make a lot of pretty throws, a lot of great deep passes, and that came up big against Clemson. And that's why I would probably say is his biggest attribute. He's played better competition, and he's come up bigger in those games. Obviously, you know, going against Harbaugh, just abusing them for the last year, or going against those tough Wisconsin teams in the Big Ten, or, you know, just like obviously you wish you would have had a better game, like a Deshaun Watson-esque game against Nick Saban and the Alabama defense. But what he was able to do against Dabo Swinney and that established college veteran team of the Clemson Tigers, I think was something, especially in a game that was very spotlighted because of who the other quarterback was on that side of the field. That's when Justin Fields came up big. And obviously, when it comes to Zach Wilson, his biggest game of last year was the Coastal Carolina game. And I flipped that on what was it, a Thursday night, and it wasn't pretty. Obviously, Coastal Carolina was able to get a lot of pressure on him, really get up in his face. And that was something that we haven't really seen too much of Zach Wilson in his tape last year, because he was sitting pretty comfortably in the pocket for most of his time at BYU. BYU had far superior line to any of the defensive lines they faced, except in that Coastal game. And that does kind of give me a little bit of concern. But we're talking about those guys, and I think those are the two guys we like the most. But there have been other names that have been thrown around. Of course, Trey Lance is another popular name that's starting to get a little bit of trendy steam going. And for him, he has all the tools. He's very Josh Allen-esque in the amount of tools he has. Rocket arm, big kid, mobile, North Dakota State, had to work his way up. Harder to evaluate at those lower division schools, especially because in a COVID year, he only played that one game last year, that one showcase game. And if you look at his game logs, he averaged about 18 pass attempts per game in the previous years, which that's very old school to see a prospect that doesn't have a lot of throwing resume in his background. Now we're seeing a lot of these kids come out. They have that shotgun, spread it out offense. And that's just not what Trey Lance in North Dakota State was doing. And then Mac Jones. I mean, Mac Jones out of Alabama. What makes that one so hard? It's just how good Alabama is. Think about this. Right. On their roster at one point, you had Jalen Waddle, Najee Harris, Henry Ruggs III, Jerry Jeudy, Devontae Smith, the Heisman Trophy winner. I mean, that's an NFL team in itself. Even if they were all true freshmen, that team could start at the pro level. And he had all those weapons at his disposal. So it's a little hard. Obviously, we saw what happened with Tua last year. What's your thoughts on Lance and Mac Jones?
I think with Trey Lance, you mentioned it, it's just a little bit difficult. I'm not going to, bash on FCS guys, because guess what? Our current starting quarterback, he is an FCS guy. So I'm not saying just because he was on the FCS level doesn't mean his talent could go ahead and be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I just think we just don't have a big sample size in the past year to see, okay, what really, what is he? What kind of quarterback is he? And you mentioned that the fact that he plays at North Dakota State is a run-first type of offense where they're just going to pound, and win games. That's all they're trying to do. They're trying to win national championships.
Hey, Jose, I mean, in fairness, our quarterback threw 8 pass attempts in the NFC Championship game, right?
Fair enough. Right. But I think I think in the future, if we get to that position, I think our starting quarterback is going to have to throw a little bit more than 8 passes during the NFC Championship game.
1970, Terry Bradshaw.
And do we know, have any of us seen Trey Lance throw more than 8 passes? I sure as hell haven't. So I don't know about him that much. I'm going to be completely honest with you. Mac Jones, we saw a lot of, and we saw him play at a very high level. If Devontae Smith didn't have a monster year, guess what? He was going to be the Heisman winner. But you mentioned it. It's the same thing with a lot of other quarterbacks that come out of Alabama. They're just filled with NFL guys. And when you're playing NFL guys, and you're playing against Ole Miss and Mississippi State, sure, SEC football is tough. It's good. You're just not, it doesn't really indicate what you really are. And another thing I kind of want to mention about us drafting up to this position, I just don't want us to be Chicago. Don't be Chicago and draft to the number 2, top 3 spot just to go ahead and draft Mitch Trubisky. Okay. That's the only thing that I don't want. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. Mac Jones has Mitch Trubisky written all over him if he even gets to that spot. But no, I think right now the 2 main guys that we're looking for is Zach Wilson and definitely Justin Fields.
Okay, Niners faithful, how excited are you about this trade? Let us know in the comments below. Let us know who is your draft day crush. Is it Wilson? Is it Fields? Maybe you're a Trey Lance believer. I want to know. Drop that below. Leave a like on this video. We actually got another video coming up here soon, so check that out. Obviously, this draft, this trade has a lot of exterior news stories to talk about, and we're happy to bring it to you heading into the draft. We'll catch you next time.